While contemporary globalization, from air travel to the internet, facilitates encounters with individuals from various social cultural backgrounds, how have those who have lived in a less connected world, when cultural shocks were more acute, experienced them? My research explores how individuals understand, navigate, and represent abrupt, intense cultural and political upheaval. Located at the intersection of modern French historical, borderland, and life writing studies, my dissertation looks at 6 unpublished diaries found in German and French archives, written in the Franco-German borderland of Alsace-Lorraine. This territory experienced 2 wars, the 1870 Franco-Prussian War and the First World War in 1914, and 2 subsequent sovereignty shifts between France and Germany over the span of 50 years. With the rise of European nationalisms exacerbated by these hostilities, the people of this region were subject to both wartime hardships and severe peacetime assimilation practices, which in turn shaped their daily private lives. How did the inhabitants experience the social, cultural, and political impositions accompanying these wars and resulting sovereignty shifts? In the first series of inquiries, I explored the effects of this tumultuous period on the writers. Following the 1871 sovereignty shift, for example, how swiftly were they forced to learn German as their native French language was outlawed? What physical dangers did they face as civilians in an occupied territory during the 2 wars? How did the conflicts and shifts impact their family relationships? In a second series of inquiries, I examined the practice and materiality of writing itself. What explicit or implicit purposes did writing serve these 6 individuals? How did their writing practices compare to traditions of gendered writing? Did they self-censor when faced with perceived risks, as suggested by code-switching, abbreviations, or in this example, erasures? My research diverges from the current scholarship on Alsace-Lorraine in 2 primary ways. The history of this borderland has previously been studied by historians who, drawing on official state archives, have examined the history to study nation-building practices and wartime legislation. However, censuses, police reports, and laws fall short of exposing the effects of the wars and the sovereignty shifts on the public. My research marks the first study in the region's historiography to focus on ordinary people and examine their diaries, as I posit that life writings are sources uniquely revealing of the daily private lives of individuals, and more specifically, of their mentalities and agency. For example, the priest Charles Massenet writes about navigating the tensions surrounding his French and German identities. While born French, he officially became German in 1871 and then French again in 1918. Although ultimately indifferent to national allegiances, at the start of the First World War, Massenet recalls in his diary having to conspicuously prove his loyalty to French troops quartering his village, drawing on French stereotypes of Germans to deliberately mock German soldiers. While police reports can tell us that Massenet was not arrested during the war, his diary reveals how he actively avoided suspicion and arrest by relying on cultural codes and gestures to adapt to the expectations of successive occupying forces. Additionally, my research focuses on the under-examined overlap between borderland and life writing studies to analyze how social and cultural contexts influence writing habits. Critics have widely recognized gendered writing practices at the turn of the 20th century, emphasizing women's tendency towards relational writing and conversely, men's auto-centered writing. The text in my dissertation challenged this conception of gendered as well as class-related writing practices. I argue that these writers' practices were above all filtered through their experience as liminal individuals in a contested borderland space. Ultimately, my dissertation engages with questions of self-representation and expression, gender, and historical methodology. Indeed, in a time of social upheaval with the COVID-19 pandemic and political uncertainty in war in Eastern Europe, my research contributes to the growing scholarship valorizing personal writings, which nowadays includes Twitter feeds and YouTube blogs, as historical sources to understand how individuals cope with unprecedented times. Thank you.